Hello, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And despite the fact that I've been resisting talking about this, especially because when I started my podcast, I talked a lot about this subject, like a lot. And the fact that nothing has changed since then, if anything, things have become worse, it just shows that people aren't willing to change, but they think that they have the right to expect anything and everything from even God. You know, that is the irony here of human nature. Not because recently this is wedding season, as you know, and obviously recently we have had a lot of. I mean, the norm now in families or family system is there are a lot of single parents, there are a lot of divorcees, there are a lot of parents who have had to throw all their burdens on their families to help take care of them, to help take care of their kids and everything. So we have throughout the world, we have this new norm for the past 2 decades that has built, in which we do not have your conventional family units. But even so, because the subcontinent believes in very strong family units, they still like to define lines, which is one thing, despite the fact that they blur all the lines in so many ways, which is again an oxymoron. But the idea that they like to define lines between relationships is something that I actually consider very important. And it is something that we are fast losing because, as I said, it's a very self-contradictory sort of a thing. On one side, we have the joint family system, which essentially blurs the lines, the very lines that we are trying to define. And on the other hand, we do think that it's extremely important that every relationship has its place and that lines do not get blurred. But as I said, because it's already a very contradictory sort of a culture that we have with regards to family and family blocks and definitions of relationships, the more we are getting into this modern era of single parents and parents who, or divorcees, or, so in other words, parents who are relying heavily on their families to help take care of them and their children, and then to help them settle on their own 2 feet or establish them, and then you get the idea. Now the problem is, as I said, that even despite as I said, there is this standard that people still try to keep, where even though, for example, they help their daughters and they help them raise their kids and they help them in every way possible, they help them move on with their lives, they help them settle down, but they maintain a clear definition in which the lines do not get blurred as to who's who. But unfortunately, there are some families that tend to think that it's okay to blur those lines. And they don't realize the amount of harm that they're causing their other children in their efforts to support that one child who decided to marry the wrong person, then decided to divorce that person, and meanwhile, in between the two, decided that it was also okay to have children, so and then after the divorce, decided that okay, now it's their parents' duty to take care of them and their children. Well, no doubt it is the parents' duty, obviously, to a certain point, to help support their children so that they can get back on their feet. But throwing your complete burden, as I've mentioned repeatedly in my older episodes, is wrong. It's wrong even in Islam. It's wrong in every culture, in every tradition, in every religion, because it causes a lot of problems. You need to understand that in Islam, it is essential not to take away from one child in order to give another. And although parents always claim that they are not doing that, the truth is, and the world knows it, because it is practically impossible otherwise, parents do indeed take from one child in order to give to the other. So when they make all that effort to take care of that one child who has decided to become a single parent, and to support their children and to help them, build their own lives. In that process, they sacrifice the other child. And it happens 9 times out of 10, which is why the world is more sensitive to it. And so whenever the world gets together in some sudden random realization of, sense of responsibility, that they need to tell the parents that, what, you are actually very badly and very negatively affecting one child in order to help the other. If you cannot do anything for that one child, at least do not impede on that child's own life. But unfortunately, that is exactly what happens. In their efforts, again, to support the one child that they're supporting, they not only take away from the other child, but they essentially impede on the other child's life. So what happens is that that child ends up getting sacrificed in every way possible. Their lives get sacrificed, their independence gets sacrificed, their ambitions, their goals, even their studies at one point, everything gets sacrificed. Now, to endure that is bad enough. But then when they're expected now to take care and to take on the burdens, of their siblings, then what you do is you've created a discrimination. You've discriminated between your children in a very bad, in a very violent, in a very brutal way, because you have caused a disharmony. Islam is all about harmony and balance in relationships. Because when you do that, you blur the lines. You see, again, you blur the lines, which again is very essential in Islam. In Islam, it is important to acknowledge every single relationship and to acknowledge that every single relationship has its own status, its own place, and these lines must not be blurred. But unfortunately, as I said, parents go out of the way to blur those lines, and they cause even more harm. So they have destroyed the other child's life, they have destroyed their youth, they've destroyed their goals, their ambitions, their financial independence, their otherwise independence, because 9 times out of 10 that child suffers to such an extent that they have become like the caretakers and the slaves and the nannies and the servants, and they are no longer respected. And God forbid if they're not married, then that adds to it, because now in every little thing they will hear, it's not like you're married, it's not like you have liabilities, it's not like you're married, it's not like you have responsibilities. And in that wake, they get taken away from them even more. And they're forced to again become nannies and servants and caretakers and guardians of the whole family now, not just of the sibling that has caused them so much harm and loss, but of their parents too, who also caused them so much harm and loss, and now of the siblings' children too. And then, how they get disrespected is when, without their permission, they are their house, for example, is being used. So if they do manage to get a house to their name, then unfortunately even that is not respected, because they were not allowed to earn their own money enough to make their own house. And so it's made a big deal of when they are, as a compensation, given a house. But then it's not their house, because now the parents, even though the house is, they claim that they've given the house to the child, but the parents are still there, and the parents are still the acting as the owners of the house. And so the actual owner of the house on paper is once again dismissed, disrespected, and disregarded, as everybody now decides that that house is a public house. And so now, if marriages are taking place, the funny thing is, again, the sibling who fell on her whole family or his whole family to be supported now have a house of their own. But strangely enough, for their own house, they've set boundaries. But for the sibling whose life they have destroyed, there are no boundaries. So without their permission, without their, without, even respecting the, giving them that much courtesy as to ask them, you know, if that can we use your house for so and so thing or for so and so. No, they just come all in. They think they have the right to have the keys to the gate. They think they have the right to have the keys to the doors. They think they have the right to come in their absence. They think they have the right to use anything and everything in the house. They think that they have the right to invite guests. They think that they have the right to even conduct the marriages of their children's celebrations in that house. And the person, the actual owner of the house, is not allowed to say a word. Yeah, they're not allowed to say a word about it. This is the kind of disrespect and dismissal that that person goes through. So much so that now even the extended family that has been formed by the by the sibling who has already been coddled so much, that now even the extended family expects that sibling to cater to them. Because now they suddenly think, oh, everybody's using that house. Oh, it means it's not that person's house. It means it is actually the family house. And so, we would also love to come there and we expect you to host us, and you're like, what the frack is going on here? So this is just an example, and I know it sounds very vague, but to people in this country, because at least 90% of the people have gone through this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, then I'll give you another example, which is an example I've given many times before, but it's very apt. Okay, so you have people in the village. When you're living in the village, sorry, it is actually, I guess, easier to cater to your neighbors, to cater to your friends, to cater to your neighbors' friends, to cater to your neighbors' relatives, to cater to their relatives. And it's somehow easy, I guess, for you to host them. And you don't consider it a big deal. It's part of your culture, it's part of your tradition, it's part of your hospitality, for which, as you know, Pakistan is very famous for. And I'm telling you why Pakistan is so famous for this hospitality, because this is how it goes, that even in villages, it is considered your birthright to walk into your neighbor's house unannounced and be expected to host. And not only that, you can even bring your relatives with you into your neighbor's house unannounced and expect to be hosted. And the other person wouldn't say a thing. But as I said, maybe it's easier for them in the village because village life is simple. Expectations aren't too high. Everybody knows that everybody will cater to everybody within their means. But they realize the toxic effect of this hospitality. Yes, because this hospitable culture can become very toxic very soon. And this is exactly why Islam also says that there must be a limit. You must set your boundaries, because the saying that good fences make good neighbors. Yeah, it is set there for a reason. You must know your boundaries. So, for example, as I said, if somebody from the village decides to, go into a big city, to live the urban life, to make life better, they have higher aims and ambitions. They want to struggle harder, make life better, get richer, whatever. Everybody's got their own ambitions. And then, they settle in the city or they leave the country and they settle down in another country. Now, what is expected of him or her? The exact same thing. The exact same thing that was expected in the village. So now they'll get a call from their father or mother. Oh, our neighbor's son's cousin's nephew? Yeah, he's coming over to you, to where you're at. So you need to keep him with you for as long as he's there. It doesn't matter that you may not be in the position, because as I said, in the village, it's actually easier because everybody comes together. By the way, even the burden is somehow the other divided. You're not exactly putting your whole burden on one neighbor, because then everybody comes together. But in the city, there's nobody there to come together. So the burden lies 100% on you. Similarly, if you're going to a different country and your father or mother calls and says, you know, our neighbors' sons, sisters, daughters, father in law's nephew, yeah, he's coming there where you're at. So we've given him your address and we've given him your phone number. You have to pick him up from the airport and you have to keep him with you for as long as he's there. And you have to. Even though, again, when you're abroad, it's a completely different situation. In fact, as you know, it is extremely hard to be very hospitable abroad because you are literally struggling 10 times more than you would be even in a city of your own country. Life gets hard. You're not in the position to accommodate somebody else, let alone accommodate them for God knows how many days, you know. And because you have been brought up in such a culture where you cannot tell them to please leave, and you cannot tell them that they have out welcomed their welcome, you just don't know what to do. And then rifts begin, grudges begin, resentments begin. And then you start setting boundaries. And then that boundary setting leads to more resentment from others because they think that it is their birthright and it is your duty. And this is where things go wrong, because this is exactly what the Prophet, peace be upon him, has warned us about, that we shouldn't do so much for somebody that they should start thinking that it's their birthright. Lines shouldn't get blurred. You should know when to stop. You shouldn't make the other person the villain. You shouldn't force the other person to become the bad guy so that that person should ask you to leave or to know your boundaries. So, for example, and this is just an example, if I have, for example, allowed my family to use my house for anything, even though they haven't even bothered to ask me about it or to ask my permission, and suddenly now they think that this is the pit stop. So now their extended family or their in-laws or their new relationships will also now expect that my house should be used, or that they should expect me to host them, or that they should you understand, it is wrong. They should even think 10 times before they even have to say such a thing in front of me, because first of all, I'm not even their immediate relative, you know. So I'm probably a cousin of their in-laws, or I'm probably a sibling of their in-laws. Their relationship should be with their in-laws. That is a direct relationship, right? The couple's parents are now supposed to maintain a relationship with each other. It's not feasible, advisable, or even, it doesn't even make sense for the couple's parents to expect the couple's, any of them in either side, to expect the couple's grandparents to suddenly become the in-laws, or to expect the couple's aunts and uncles to become the in-laws. We're not. Nobody is. Your relationship is strictly between the two of you. And if you do not want to maintain that relationship, again, that is on you. If you do not want to call each other or host each other, it's on you. But you should at least have the common sense and the decency and the courtesy to know where your boundaries lie, instead of thinking that, because the family has been taking care of their burdens and their shit their whole lives, so now the family is automatically our pit stop, No. In fact, especially if after suppose you have taken the help and support of your family. They have helped you, supported you. They have helped bring up your children. Now your children are old enough that they're getting married. It should stop now. The help, the support should stop now, right here, right there. Your children are married. You're old enough now to take care of your own children, your children's spouses, relationships, whatever. Why are you still expecting your parents and your siblings to cater to all of that? More to the point, why are your married children expecting their grandparents and aunts and uncles to cater to them? It should stop now. I thought the whole point of getting married and living your own independent life in your own house is that you should now learn to live your own life. You should learn to define relationships and boundaries. Why is it that those who have taken so much from their families and who have burdened their families so much think that they have the right to put boundaries, but they are not respecting the boundaries set up by their families now? Their families are now ready to set up boundaries. Their families are like, okay, now you take care of your own shit. For once in your freaking life, for once in your pathetic, miserable life, take care of your own shit and leave us the frack alone. Give us a break already. But you don't seem to be giving them a break. It's a never-ending hell in which you've put your family through, which they cannot escape until death. This is the result. This is the consequence of parents making the mistake of not setting those boundaries right at the start. And this is something that wise parents in the subcontinent and all over the world do. They set boundaries. They do not do it verbally, they do it practically. But parents who just yap and talk about boundaries but never actually set them practically, nobody takes them seriously. That is why I keep on saying actions speak louder than words. You can yap all you want. For example, Israel can yap all it wants, but the whole world can see what Israel is doing. The whole world can see that Israel is the perpetrator. It's the invader. America and Trump can yap all they want about Iran, but the whole world can see that it's a lie. That they actually just want a regime change in Iran because they want to be able to control Iran. Because Iran is the only country standing between Israel and the Greater Israel plans. The whole world can see that. Similarly, Asim Munir can yap all he wants. The whole world knows he's a murderer and he's illegal. He's not even supposed to be army chief. He's illegally sitting on a post that he hasn't even gotten notice of. The Nawaz Sharif and Shahbaz Sharif and Zardari can yap all they want, but the whole world knows they're not elected. They stole the public mandate. The whole world knows that they are not our elected government. And the whole world knows, because of America's silence, because of Britain's endorsement and American endorsement, that these two countries are the ones that planted these a-holes on top of us. Just like how they're trying to plant some a-hole on top of the Iranians. Just like how they kidnapped the president of Venezuela. Nobody cares about what comes out of your mouth. People look at your actions. This is something that I've explained to people 1,000 times. I've especially explained it to stupid parents who make such stupid mistakes of ruining their families by blurring the lines. They keep on yapping about boundaries, but they don't set boundaries. They're just talk, and they end up ruining lives. They end up causing resentment. And then you sit and wonder why families are not closely knit together anymore. It's the parents' fault. People think that, it's the parents that keep the family together. No. Once upon a time, it was the parents that kept the family together. But actually, for decades now, it is the parents that are the source of breakage in family relationships. They are the reason why families are not close-knit anymore. Because parents do not deal with their children justly. They do not deal with their children fairly. They sabotage one child to enable another. And then they make that child think that it is the birthright of that child to keep on putting their burdens on everybody forever. And then their children think that, it's our birthright too. And then the cycle goes on because you're not practically stopping it. You're yapping about boundaries, but you're not setting boundaries. And those who are setting boundaries don't even have the right to set boundaries because they're the ones that crossed the boundaries in the first place. But I find it very ironic that the selfish people who always take, they set boundaries and cannot give, but they still want to keep on taking. Boundaries go both ways. If you want to set a boundary, you must respect the other person's boundary. Just like how you don't like people to come to your house without your permission, you have no right to invite guests over and to have ceremonies and celebrations and to just walk into the other person's house without their permission. You can't. Do not take the other person's silence for weakness. All you're doing is causing more resentment, you're causing more anger, and you're causing more rifts. Know your own boundaries, okay? By knowing your own boundaries, it means set boundaries for yourself, not for others. Set boundaries for yourself so that you know that you cannot cross those lines, you cannot cross those boundaries, you cannot encroach upon another person's personal space or life space. Especially since you are probably the reason why that person has gone through hell in the first place. You have no right to even have any expectations from that person. And I don't know, but I find it very, very blatantly shameless of Pakistanis, the way they expect from others as if it's their birthright. It's amazing, the shamelessness. For a country that claims to be an Islamic country, you do not have a single act worthy of it within your lifestyle that can say that, yeah, that is an Islamic implementation. You know, that that your life has, that you practice any form of your religion, to be honest. Hospitality does not mean trespassing. As I said, I even made a vlog about it where I showed how if you go to Murray, for example, people think nothing of it to trespass on your land. They literally think that they have the right to go through your land, and if you try to set up walls or boundaries, they literally come and fight with you and tell you that you have no right to mark a boundary of your own land, that they have every right to jump onto your roof, go down, use your stairs to go downstairs. They have every right to walk into your home without knocking your door. They have every right to climb up your trees and steal your fruits. They have every right to keep animals in your absence in your house. They have every right to pluck the fruits off of your trees. They have every right to use your property in your absence. This is the mentality here that we have. Again, as I said, it's the village mentality where people have no sense of propriety, people have no sense of personal space. And this is how it becomes a toxic culture. It's no longer a hospitable culture, it is a toxic culture because you need to have boundaries even when you're being hospitable. You need to know your boundaries, you need to set your boundaries. If you have no sense of property, if you have no sense of trespass, if you have no sense of boundaries, then that is not hospitality. That is toxic. That is toxic culture trait. And you need to fix it. Within families as well, this toxic culture needs to be fixed. Your aunt is not your mother. Your uncle is not your father. Your grandparents are not your parents, especially if your parents are alive and kicking. If you have a house of your own and you have your parents who are alive, you do not have the right to constantly burden your grandparents or your aunts or your uncles. There must be a limit to it. And when you're grown up and you have a life of your own, then you absolutely have no right whatsoever to have any expectations from them. But unfortunately, I've seen this happen over and over again around me, that people keep on and on crossing those boundaries. So, for example, if my nephew is married, if he thinks that he can come into my house anytime he likes without my permission, I think it is my generosity if I cater to it quietly. But he has his own house. He has his mother who's alive and kicking. He has his father alive and kicking. He has his whole house. Why is it that he thinks that it's okay for him to disturb me? In other words, why would my parents think it's okay for him to disturb me and my privacy? You know, why would his parents think it's okay to disturb me and my privacy? I'm just putting it out there as an example. Why would his in-laws think it's okay to disturb my privacy? Because you see, that's the whole point. I am not his immediate family at the end of the day. His immediate family exists. He has a home of his own. His family has to take the responsibility of dealing with his in-laws. It's not my responsibility. It's not my parents' responsibility either, but if they want to, again, they can do that with his parents without involving me. The problem I don't understand, the thing I don't get here in our culture is, why are you involving people who have nothing whatsoever to do with anything? Why do you keep involving them and dragging them into your mess or into your relationships? Why do you force them to cater to your needs and your demands and your wants and your desires? Especially when you have never done that for them. This is called taking. You see, you're taking from them, but you're not giving them anything in return. The least you can do is to respect their privacy, to respect their house privacy, to respect their life's privacy, to respect them this much that you should acknowledge the fact that they have the right to say no. But the minute they say no, the whole family runs after them again, as if it is their duty to cater to everybody's whims. Again, the irony here is nobody ever catered to their whims. So they have now been taken for granted. Why? Instead of being ashamed of using and abusing them like that, everybody is literally treating them, especially as I said, if God forbid they're single or they're married but childless. Everybody treats them as if they don't have the right to enjoy their lives, or they don't have a right to a life of their own, or they don't have, why? Because you don't have kids, so you have no liabilities. Why is it your freaking problem? They chose not to have liabilities. You have no right to dump your liabilities onto them. That's the point here. The point here is, if they chose not to get married, it's because they wanted a free life to enjoy, but you just fucked it up. If they're married and they chose not to have kids, again, it's because they just wanted to enjoy their lives, but you decided to come and fuck it up. You decided to enslave them. And then you sit and say, oh, in our culture, they don't have a life. Those who are not married or those who don't have children, they have such sad lives. Yeah, because you make it sad. They're supposed to have the most wonderful lives of their, they're supposed to have the most wonderful times of their lives. They're supposed to have the most wonderful lives ever. You're the ones that have made their lives hell. You're the ones that have made them have no life. You're the ones who keep on forcing them to sacrifice their privacy, their freedom, their happiness, their goals, their ambitions for you. Why? Because they chose to be single or to be childless so that they could have a life. And because they are single and childless, you decided that they had no right to have a life. You do realize that in the day of judgment, you are going to be punished for this too, right? Albeit you are just Muslims in name only, because you don't actually believe. I mean, the way people behave, to be very honest, I do believe people actually do not believe in the hereafter. People do not believe in getting punishment in the hereafter. They don't believe in accountability. They don't actually. I've noticed this, because as I've said 1,000 times, if you really, really believe that there is a God, you would believe in the hereafter. And if you believe in the hereafter, you would believe in the consequences of whatever it is that you're doing here. Because God has already made it very clear that these are unforgivable sins. Any sin committed against another person, any act of trespass committed against another person, any act of wrong against another person, any act of humiliation against another person, any act of dismissal against another person is an unforgivable sin. No questions asked, no exceptions. So tell me, what makes you think that you're going to survive the hereafter? Just because you're surviving this life while ruining other people's lives. And again, more to the point, I think, again, as I said, the shamelessness of the family members themselves is also worth noting. But even more worth noting is that when the extended families or friends or relatives that come into the mix, when they also think that, oh, it's okay. It's okay to use and abuse this person. It's okay to use their home. It's okay to, to have expectations from them. Why even? From where is that logic even stemming? Would you like yourselves to be put in that position? No. Then why is it okay for you to put somebody else in that position? Just think about that. This is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.